Let's go.
Everybody, this is Elena from Cross Cultural Development, and you are listening to Bending Culture Podcast, the show where we master the art of cultural collaboration and where the professional learn how to grow and thrive in the multicultural world we live and work in today, and how to become a real global game changer. Every episode, I'm sitting down with a guest and we talk about his or her experience on the subject of cross culture. We discuss their personal journeys and the lessons they have learned, because you know how life is. It's you win some or you learn some. And my experience in cross cultural development, it's mostly lessons learned and some small wins in between. So I always ask them to share their practical experience-based tips so that everybody who is listening can do something with that. And today, the guest is Giovanna Debye, and now it's going to be difficult. Mazari.
Perfect.
Or Coach Gia, that is much simpler. And she's from Gia Coaching and Consulting. Gia's drive is to help her clients to grow, to transform. And she's specializing in this transformation in bridging of cultural gaps. So she's a perfect guest for this episode, right? The specialization of Gia comes from her personal story, and I'm sure she will tell more about it in a couple of minutes. But just to give a short preview, Gia was born in Guatemala, raised in the United States, and now she lives and works in the Netherlands. Yeah, some international multicultural background. She says that those experiences have shaped her into a global citizen. We met by inspiring people, and we had a vivid discussion right away about how egalitarian Dutch people are or not, what they think they are. And yeah, that was something to wrap your mind around, because we all think that Dutch people are very egalitarian, and that's how they view themselves, how they view the world, and how they are famous for. But that is not what Gia thinks about it. So Gia, welcome. And I'm very honored to have you at this episode today at the program. And let's see if we can continue our discussions today.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me. So just full disclosure, you froze a little, so I lost a little bit of the last part you said. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that I told the viewers how we met, and that right away we had a very huge discussion, not a huge discussion, but vivid discussion about the Dutch thinking themselves very egalitarian and priding themselves on their egalitarian view of the world, and being somebody who works in the businesses, I share their view, but that is totally not the view you have of them. So what are your experiences with Dutch people that make you think that they're not as egalitarian as they like to think?
Well, I've worked for corporate 18 years, so I stopped last year. And in the role, I was an executive assistant to the C-suite. So I was working with CEOs and CFOs. So I can say I really got to see all sorts of leadership styles. And also I was very privileged to see all the dynamics. The common thread for foreign leaders coming into the Netherlands is that they could sense they say one thing, but it's not adding up completely, right?
Right.
So I think that the Dutch do have a value of egalitarianism, of course, and that it's historical, and that's how it's come about. People like to reference the Polder model, of course, with consensus and,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the Polder model is an economic model that was put forth to help the Dutch economy recover in the 1980s, right?
Okay.
And I believe it came from the Wassenaar Accord, which was to revitalize the economy through wage control and through the development of employment, etc. So, but the principle is consensus. We come together to make decisions, right? And this is something that has been throughout the history of the Dutch. So it's in their DNA to have consensus. But the more I worked in corporate, the more I realized, yes, that's a beautiful way of doing things. And yes, you want to bring everybody to the table. But at the end of the day, you will do what the boss says. In the companies that I've worked at,
Yeah.
they do gather all the information, but the final decision will rest on that executive committee.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Why do you think it is? Because it's when you are saying that, I'm thinking right away about the Germans. That's that everybody's get together and the opinions are shared, and then okay, there is a German hierarchy, and the boss is taking the decision. So, but I didn't think about it as something Dutch people also doing.
Well, I think it's, they subconsciously still expect a higher up to give the final go. So it's something that perhaps they're not so aware of. The beauty of the Dutch culture is indeed that they have this principle of egalitarianism. So your voice counts or your voice is heard. And that's a very, very important aspect of Dutch culture. But when it comes to it, they take all the information in and somebody in the end will have to make that decision. So I've worked in companies very flat, and yet nothing would happen unless the boss had approved. And they had all the email trails to say that everything had gone through the hoops and it had been approved,
Okay. So it was a Dutch company.
A very Dutch company, yeah.
Very Dutch. That is so funny because I think you and me are coming from cultures where the opinion of the one is not actually very important, right?
Exactly.
So we are really used to hierarchical way of the boss taking the decision and all this paper trail in the paper way or email way that proves that the decision is taken. It's funny, but when I was talking with you last time, we also talked about the royal family.
Yes.
And since that moment, I started to think how true egalitarian a culture can be where there's still a king or a queen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because
and I come from a republic and I grew up in a republic. So the concept of royalty to me is still a little interesting because so somebody decided that you were going to unite people because that is the role of a king, right? To unite his people. But not all the rules apply to you necessarily. There's a contradiction for me in that sense. And I'm not a Republican. I don't have anything against it's simply the concept of not all the rules apply to this one person because they have that title. That doesn't, to me, just doesn't feel like it's truly egalitarian. you know?
Yeah.
Although their behavior is quite egalitarian, I mean, they'll talk to people and they're very accessible, right? So versus
and
other
real power of a monarch nowadays, it's quite nominal, right? So we are talking about the very long democracies, but like French are very proud of their democracy and their Republican way. But till how many years ago they were like very ruled by one person, and that is the top of the way how hierarchical structures are made. So it's very funny. Sometimes in cross culture we put a label on the phenomena.
Yeah.
Like Dutch are egalitarian and German are hierarchical and stuff like that. But when you go deeper, it's not all that black and white, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's very nuanced. And the way the society organized itself, I believe it was also in pillars, right? So, and even now, I think there was a study on contemporary inequality done by the Institute for Social Research in
Here in the
2023
Netherlands.
here in the
Huh?
Netherlands. And for the study, where they were talking about inequity between classes, they do say these classes exist.
Yeah.
So if you're so egalitarian, but you're still dividing the classes, and there is the privileged younger people echelon, there is the working upper echelon, there's the leisured upper echelon, and all of that has to do with the capital that they have, whether it's economic capital or cultural capital or social capital or personal capital, right? So that's like physical health and mental health, etc. It is divided into classes.
Yeah. So it's maybe not the caste like in India,
Correct.
but can we then ever truly talk about egalitarian society, or is it like an utopia? I'm coming from Soviet background,
Mm-hmm.
from socialism, which was thriving to be communism, where the egalitarian should
Yeah.
be everything, and it was most corrupt countries in the world maybe today, and with a lot of almost dictatorship, let's put it this way. So can it really talk about egalitarian societies actually?
Well, it's a very philosophical question, of
Yeah,
course.
that's true.
But I think that the most important thing is that we human are in an age where human beings are having way more self-awareness, and they are much better at understanding their own biases. Where are these biases coming from? I was born in Guatemala. I was raised in the United States, but I became an adult in the Netherlands. And that's something I really mean with all my heart. I am the person that I am because of the Netherlands, and because it has challenged me in so many ways against my own biases, and the things that I thought, no, it's black and white and that's it. So in that, I think the egalitarian ideal is certainly played a big role in that. So uh, in Guatemala, you have very independent women, yes, and very strong women, and all over Latin America. But there's still, and it's slowly changing, of course, but there's still females are feminine and the weaker, perhaps, and they're not meant to look a certain, and
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
here
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah.
I'm perfectly okay to walk out without any makeup in Guatemala. I would be looking really weird if I did. Like, oh, she's very ill, or she doesn't take care of herself. There's immediately a judgment. Here, it doesn't matter. You get out and you do what you need to do. So I think that there is the principle of egalitarianism. It will continue to always be a very strong part of the Dutch identity. I believe in 2050, the population of the Netherlands will look completely different, right?
Yeah.
The native Dutch will thrive is as an understanding where their biases are, where and understanding what egalitarianism means really to them, right?
Yeah, it's such a buzzword if you don't put it. What is, in your perspective, the biggest biases Dutch people have about themselves?
That they're very open. And they are, but we have to look at it in the context of they are very much a me culture, and I come from a we culture. I dare say that you perhaps also come from a we culture where
Yeah.
family and the opinion of the family is incredibly important, whereas here it's generally more the individual makes the
Yes.
decision, right?
Yes.
And that's a great deal of responsibility. A funny story: I often am asked, "Where are you from?"
Hmm.
Guatemala. Oh, okay. And that there's the curiosity. But as soon as I say, "And what about you? Are you from Amsterdam or are you from North Holland?" They shut down.
Do you
They
think
don't.
they get offended?
That's too private. That's too personal. Hey, you're stepping over a border. And
Okay.
so they give you a vague response. Yeah, I'm from the north. Okay, the north. That could be Friesland as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
they're not so open to. I'm not saying everybody, but I've experienced that in a lot of situations where people won't say, or for example, they want to know everything about your house and this and that. And where do you live? in the other village, you know? So they're not, you
Okay. So
know,
that openness, we talk about everything. We're just like an open book
yeah.
is maybe a little bit overrated. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's maybe, they really value privacy. That's something that it's funny. They'd want their shades open, you know,
Goodness, that was
right?
some cultural shock.
That we just don't do that in where I come from. But once you ask the question that's a little more deep, then they're like, hang on a minute, that's my private realm, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
perhaps that's something that they don't realize themselves. I love that they're very curious, but they're not perhaps so willing to be open. And I'm talking about people perhaps our age. If you speak to an elderly person, they will open up because they're lonely, of course, right? So they
Okay.
just
Yes.
want to
Yes. Yes.
share,
Yes.
to have
That's
that
that.
contact.
Yeah.
And perhaps a Generation Z is a little bit more open to just tell you because they're a little bit more flexible. So I'm talking about a very specific age group.
Now, as we started about the age group, because I prepared this question for you, I prepared normally 2 or 3 questions, which interest me. And I know that you work a lot with students. And what I often hear now that the generational difference beats the cultural one. That this difference in how the generations see the world and what their values are, what their ideas are, is much bigger, and something that people on the work floor really have to deal with in an urgent way is the difference of work ethics between the generation. Do you really think that is that the generational difference is the bigger issue than the cultural difference?
I think it's more the values issue than the cultural one, because and yes, I do work with some students at the Technical University of Eindhoven, and
Yes.
we work on their leadership skills because they're future leaders. And funny topics that have come up is very Dutch students say, I said what the task was, but the team didn't pick it up.
Okay.
So I asked, so how diverse is your team? And then they expressed, well, they're from this area of the world and that area of the world. And the person said, no, but I said what the task was, but they just didn't do it. And I said, well, did you assign the task directly? No, but I said what the task was, so I expect them. So that's a
Yeah.
very Dutch way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, well, let's try this and just be very blunt when you assign the task. And trust me, the people coming from this geographical area will not be offended. They actually expect you to do that.
Yeah.
And then the person went ahead and did it and said it was magic. They did the task. But then that person had to deal with their own emotion at that moment is, but I don't want to be a dictator. And I said, but you're not being a dictator, you're not. So
Yeah.
it was a really beautiful exercise. So that went more into that person's value.
Yeah.
Right? I want everyone to have an equal opportunity. So the egalitarianism.
Yeah.
But I also, as someone with a Dutch background, I expect people to just take up the task.
Yeah. To be
right?
more assertive.
So luckily that situation happened, and this person is developing their leadership style to also be more direct. That person was made aware of it. So I think it's more the newer generations are more open to all sorts of cultures. The information that they've grown up with is not the information you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
You were the second world, I was the third world, right? And
is it, that is
you
exactly
know,
that was how we were divided, right? First
yeah,
world, second world. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And you grew up in the Soviet Union. I grew up in Guatemala, or I lived in I came from Guatemala. And we went to the first world eventually. There was that bias of they know what they're doing, we don't know what we're doing, and then we realized, wait a minute, nobody knows what they're doing. you know? you know? So I think it's more the younger generation is more prone to question values, and they're more willing to connect, perhaps culturally.
Last week, I was talking to some HR managers, and I was telling them how they can help the leaders of the company to steer the international teams. And there was one lady, she said, you are saying, okay, they need to be more directive, more, maybe what you say, assigning the task, being more, not dictator, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she said, we also have young people and they want more coaching leadership style. I said, yes. And I can imagine, and I cannot imagine a more difficult time for leaders to be a good and effective leader now, because the world is so diverse. We have 5 generations
Mm-hmm.
on the work floor,
Yeah.
all with different values and different way of seeing what effective leadership is. We have all the nationalities. And yeah, I think it's most difficult and exciting time to be a leader. How do you teach those students? How do you help them with their leadership skills?
Well, I keep it very close to the values, right?
Okay.
I think that that is the basis for everything. And I let them explore. I let them feel feelings as well, right? Because also we are in Northern Europe, you don't talk about feelings much.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you're talking a little bit about it. Perhaps it's coming more to the surface, but I let them test things out. And I really believe that when you do something, you find out what the end result is, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's a bit of the approach. But to your point of different generations working on the work floor, when I was at a company where there was this gap, I wasn't coaching. I was working at the company in my previous roles. Both people came to me, and both people were having the issue. I can't talk to this person, right?
Okay.
And so they both came to me, and that's how I knew I needed to be a coach, right? So people were coming to me with this kind of issues. And I said to the eldest person, I said, well, they're not a threat. They're not here to threaten you. But you do have to accept they have way more knowledge on the specific technology than you do. What
Yeah.
happens if you ask for advice? Yeah, but yeah, I'm the director, but you don't know how this works. What if you just ask for advice and do it in a nice way?
Yeah.
And then when the younger person came in, I said, you have to take into consideration this person has been with the company for more than 30 years. So
Yeah.
imagine how old the person was, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
more than 30 years. The way it was back then, you really had to go through the ranks. And now here you are, you're not 30 yet, and you already have a managerial role. So that can be a clash, right? So I kind of help them understand that. And that's what I love about the younger generation as well. They were like, I've never thought of it that way. And they're so open to
Yeah.
learning. And what if you start out by asking for advice? Wow, you've been here for so many years. Can you give me some tips?
Yeah.
And there you create a synergy, right? Because they're
Yeah.
both asking for advice. They're going to get something out of it.
Yeah.
One is showing respect for the seniority. The other is showing respect for the technological wizard that the
Yeah.
younger kid is, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I helped that bridge.
And that was the moment that you knew that you need to switch your career and
Yeah.
go and
That was one of the many moments.
what
Yeah.
is what do you find the most rewarding in the work that you are doing now?
Some sessions I do face to face, some I do online, but there's always a certain movement in the face when the coin drops and they get it.
Oh, I know this. I know.
Oh, that right there, that is like the sun comes out. It's such a beautiful moment
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
realize that's it, and then you know that they will get over the hurdle that they're facing.
Yeah. And it's still a big journey ahead, because knowing something
Yeah,
and doing something is still a gap, right?
yeah,
But I know exactly what you mean. That this moment, and then, holy shit, that is
yeah.
how it is. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's it. It's so incredibly rewarding. I get so much energy that sometimes I can't sleep. Because I'm so full of energy, but it's just
Mm.
it's so beautiful to see humans develop. It's just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. That's so nice. That I share this with you. So I think that is also, what makes us choose this job, because before that I was also doing something different, and there are a lot of great things about my previous job, but there are some things that really, like this advertisement of Mastercard, this you can pay for this money, you can pay, but the feeling is is you cannot put price tag on the feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
Joanna, when you look at the work you are doing today, and maybe with the work you were doing before, how do you think our cultural habits and our cultural biases influence the business world of today? And it can be from career choices to teamwork to leadership style. We already talked a little bit about.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that our cultural biases can definitely have an impact on the success and failure of things within a team, within a company. When people cannot adapt, and there it's my way or the highway, and I'm the boss because they come from a hierarchical environment, then you cause a lot of damage to the team, and you cause a lot of damage to yourself because it's a story you will repeat again and again, no matter where you go. I think the hardest thing to have is self-awareness. There's another thing. The fact that you are a leader who has been in 5 different countries doesn't mean you're culturally aware.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that you have cultural sensitivity to your team. So it's very important to know, like, accept that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
Adapt, be open. If you're a new leader from the US or the UK or France or even Germany, you know, accept that when you come to the Netherlands, you're probably going to be faced with some manager talking back because the culture is very much about I want to express my experience or my opinion, and you're a manager, so you will hear it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I have my opinion, so you
Yeah,
will hear it. Yeah.
exactly. And it's also really funny. You have cultures that are so similar, like the Dutch culture and the German culture, and a lot of times they clash, and
Yeah.
not for historical reasons, but simply because for the Germans, hierarchy is still incredibly important, and for the Dutch, they believe it isn't, right?
Yeah.
But maybe deep down they do expect a certain level, but the tone of how you're saying things can really affect the
Yeah.
effectiveness of the team.
Yeah.
So I think if you're working in a team or if you're leading a team, adaptability is the most important thing based on your self-awareness and your cultural sensitivity.
What will be your tip as someone who is working with leaders? What will be your tip for the leaders? You don't know what you don't know. Huh? How do you create as a leader this self-awareness? How do you become aware of all this stuff when you don't have a coach or somebody, a mentor who can take you through this process?
Yeah.
What can be your tip on this?
Well, I'm going to give 2 tips. The first tip is you need to hire someone like Elena and someone like myself. For
Come on,
sure.
guys. Yeah. Yeah.
But the tip is, listen attentively, listen actively, don't listen to respond. I think the greatest leaders are the ones that say very little when they're meeting someone. They just take it in. I think that it's important. So you can come in and you talk to the leader, and perhaps that person already has a bias because they feel a certain way, or they have a bias because they've listened to their advisory team and they have a bias, so they're taking on the bias of the team. So you really have to go in with a blank slate. You put the
Yeah.
judgment aside for a couple of minutes and just listen to what that person has to say,
Yeah.
and where they're coming from. And it's okay if you're perhaps from Northern Europe and you speak to someone from Latin America, you might come in with the idea, oh, they're very emotional, they're very passionate,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe that person's really trying to tell you there's a big issue here. It's not that there's passion in it. No, they're actually trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
take away the perception
Judgment.
you might have.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. That was tip number one. What is the tip number two?
Oh, no, tip number 1 was you need to hire
Oh,
people like Elena and me.
oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, of course. I forgot the most important tip. Oh my goodness.
Well, I think, no
Yeah.
kidding now, it's important for companies to invest in this type of advisory, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is, and you can talk about the big companies, the big advisory firms. If you're going to do that, then make sure that the team that you're bringing in is truly diverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this might sound a little controversial, but if you want to address cultural issues, you might bring a PhD from the same country who's got exactly the same biases. Well, you're not going to get anywhere.
No. Exactly. Yeah.
Make sure that you do hire diverse
Yeah.
advisory to help out in bridging the gaps. And for the leaders, just forget everything that you know, that you think you know, and come in with, I dare say, an open heart, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to say an open mind, but an open heart maybe even more important because it takes away the emotion, right? That this open heart. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much. Um, if you never play with the ideas of egalitarian way of viewing the world, if you never thought about this topic of cross-cultural and how we all can be different due to our biases and how judgmental we can be, I'm sure that after listening to this short conversation with Giovanna and myself, and her telling about her journey and her experiences with her students and the people she's working with, leaders, you understand now that next to all these important management and leadership skills, understanding cultural differences is becoming one of the most powerful professional tools.
Correct.
So if you feel inspired by what Gia told us today, and if you want to learn more and become more confident in navigating the multicultural landscape, check Gia's website. What was it, the website, Giovanna?
www.
So check this website. And otherwise, join me in 2 weeks for more tips on Bending Culture podcast. So I want to thank you for your time and your generosity, sharing your ideas, your views, your tips with the audience. And you know, guys, we are still starting out. It's episode number 6. So your support will mean the world. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave the review, share this episode with a global game changer. Until I see you again, this is Elena from Cross Cultural Development. And let's keep bending culture together with our beautiful guests, with you all, and with me, striving for inclusive business world. Thank you, and I see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you, Gia.
Thank you.